When the billionaire slid her a sealed note and said, "Translate this, and your life changes," Layla thought it was another rich man's game, until the words she read made him go completely silent. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. Not tonight. For now, Layla stirred another cappuccino behind the marble counter of the Aurelian, the most opulent restaurant in London. Gold light pooled over glass tables, every surface gleaming with the kind of wealth that demanded to be noticed. She'd learned to fade into the background here, to be the invisible heartbeat of luxury. "Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin." Her uniform was pressed, her hair tucked neatly under a black ribbon. No one saw the dog-eared French novel peeking from her apron pocket or knew that she spoke 5 languages fluently. Her world was service. "Oui, monsieur. Of course, madam. Right away." She told herself she didn't mind. That hiding brilliance was safer than exposing it in a world that dismissed waitresses as decor. Across town, Khalid Al-Rashad's convoy glided through Mayfair's narrow streets. Inside the car, silence reigned. His assistant spoke in hushed Arabic over the phone, confirming the evening's reservation. Khalid's reflection in the tinted window stared back at him, impeccably dressed, unreadable. To the world, he was the architect of billion-dollar deals, a man rumored to have inherited empires and buried scandals. But his wealth had never silenced the ghosts. Every fortune, every tower he built, seemed to whisper the same accusation. "You failed him." When he closed his eyes, he still heard his brother's voice, fading beneath the desert wind. At the Aurelian, Layla's shift dragged on. She poured, smiled, cleared, smiled again. Her co-workers chattered about celebrity guests and tips. She just focused on surviving another night. "Table 12, private booking," her manager said, slipping an envelope into her hand. "High-profile client. You'll serve him personally." Layla frowned. "Why me?" "Because he asked for the woman who speaks languages. Don't ask how he knows." That pricked something inside her, a flicker of curiosity she hadn't felt in months. When Khalid entered, time seemed to pause. His presence was gravity. Sharp suit, calm eyes that seemed to weigh everything and reveal nothing. Layla greeted him politely, unaware of the storm she was about to walk into. Their first exchange was formal. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to start with something to drink?" "Arabic coffee," he replied. His accent was soft but deliberate. Saudi, tinged with London polish. When she returned with the silver pot, he looked up from the folder on his table and studied her. "You're not from here." Layla hesitated. "Born in Tangier. Moved when I was 8. A brief nod. "So you speak Arabic?" "And French. English. A little Italian." His lips curved, but not in amusement. "Then perhaps you can help me with something." He reached into his jacket and placed a small, sealed note on the table. The wax seal shimmered faintly under the chandelier's glow. "Translate this," he said quietly. "If you can." Layla blinked. "Sir, I'm not. I'll make it worth your while." His tone wasn't flirtation, it was challenge. "But only if you're brave enough to read what's inside." She froze. Something in his eyes, tired, wounded, made her chest tighten. But professionalism won. "As you wish." She slipped the note into her apron, promising herself she'd peek later. After the rush, after the tips, after she'd convinced herself it didn't matter. Yet as she cleared his table, she noticed he hadn't touched his coffee. He sat staring into nothing, thumb resting over an old silver ring. The kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full, waiting. Later that night, as the restaurant emptied, Layla's curiosity won. She broke the wax seal. Inside were 3 lines of Arabic scrawled in ink that looked almost trembled. Beneath it, a translation in rough French. Fragmented, poetic, desperate. The first line read, "If you find these words, you've already found the one thing I lost." Her breath caught. Who writes something like that? And why would a man like him, a billionaire, carry a note like this in his pocket. In a different part of the city, Khalid sat alone in his suite overlooking the Thames. He opened his phone, read the message from an unlisted number. The girl has the note. The next move is yours. He closed his eyes, the weight of the past pressing against his chest. Maybe, he whispered in Arabic, it's time someone finally understood. Layla almost didn't return to work the next evening. She'd barely slept, haunted by the words from the note. The handwriting was intimate, unguarded, aching. It wasn't business. It was confession. She could still hear the sentence looping in her mind. If you find these words, you've already found the one thing I lost. She had no idea what it meant, or why a billionaire would carry such sorrow in his pocket, but it stirred something inside her, something she couldn't silence. When she arrived at the Aurelian, her manager intercepted her immediately. Table 12 again. Same guest. Her heart stuttered. Mr. Al-Rashad? He nodded, lowering his voice. And this time he requested you by name. Layla's stomach fluttered. Part fear, part something she refused to name. Khalid was already seated when she entered. This time, he wasn't reading or making calls. He was just waiting. The restaurant's golden glow softened his features, but the shadows beneath his eyes were darker tonight. When she approached, he looked up. You read it, didn't you? She froze, tray balanced in her hands. Sir, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. His tone wasn't angry. It was quiet, measured. I wanted you to. Layla set the tray down, her fingers trembling slightly. Then why ask me to translate it if you already knew I would? Because no one else ever could. He leaned forward, eyes steady. The words, they're not just Arabic or French. They're between languages, between worlds. Like you. Her breath caught. Between worlds. He nodded faintly. You belong to both. That's why you understood the tone. Layla hesitated. It wasn't just tone, sir. It was pain. Whoever wrote it was me. The air between them went utterly still. Layla's lips parted. You. Khalid's jaw tightened. I wrote that letter 10 years ago. It was meant for someone I lost. A woman who never read it. The only person who could have. She sank slowly into the chair across from him, forgetting the professional boundaries that should have kept her standing. And now you carry it with you? He gave a humorless smile. Every day. It's my punishment and my compass. Layla studied him, the man who seemed untouchable now looking almost breakable. Why show it to me? Because you read it the way it was meant to be heard. He reached into his jacket again and slid another envelope toward her. This one too. Her hand hovered above it. Sir, I don't think. Call me Khalid. The sound of his name, spoken aloud for the first time, filled the space between them with warmth and danger. She opened the envelope slowly. Inside was another fragment, this one written entirely in Arabic, the ink smudged from what might have once been tears. She translated softly, her voice trembling. You cannot bury guilt beneath gold. The sand remembers. And so do I. When she looked up, Khalid's expression had changed completely. The mask was gone. How did you know what the third line meant? He asked quietly. Most translators miss it. Layla blinked. It wasn't a translation. It was feeling. You wrote it like a man speaking to a ghost. Khalid's throat worked. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then, barely above a whisper, she was my brother's fiancée. Layla's breath caught. Oh. She died before the wedding. There were complications. And a will. I signed something I didn't read, and in doing so, I destroyed her family's legacy. $180 million, gone to the wrong hands. And I can't fix it. Layla didn't know what to say. But something inside her shifted. Pity melting into empathy. Empathy deepening into quiet connection. You've been trying to find a way to make peace, she said softly. He nodded once. For 10 years. And the poem? It's what's left of my apology. Layla hesitated, then reached for the paper. May I finish translating? He gestured for her to go on. Her voice shook as she continued. But if you find these words, know that my silence was love misspoken, not absence. When she looked up, Khalid's eyes glistened. For a long, fragile moment, neither moved. The world outside faded, the clinking of glasses, the murmurs of other tables. Only two people existed. The man who lost everything, and the woman who somehow understood. Finally, he spoke. No one ever translated it that way. She smiled faintly. Maybe because they were only reading the words. And you? I listened to the silence between them. That broke him. His composure, his armor. All of it cracked. He looked away, exhaling through a trembling laugh. You have no idea what you've done, Layla. Then tell me, she said quietly. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he rose from his seat, placed a folded bill beneath the saucer, and said, Keep the note. I'll return for your answer. She watched him leave, her pulse racing, the weight of his words echoing through her chest. You have no idea what you've done, Layla. She touched the paper still warm from his hands and realized she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. For 2 days, Layla tried to convince herself that what happened at table 12 was just a strange encounter. She told herself he was only a customer, that the look in his eyes, the weight of his voice when he said her name, meant nothing. But every time she replayed that moment in her mind, she felt the same quiet shiver. And worse, she still had the letter. She kept it tucked inside the pages of her French novel, as if hiding it between words might make it less real. But at night she'd pull it out, tracing the lines of his handwriting, whispering the translation to herself like a secret prayer. My silence was love misspoken, not absence. She didn't even understand why it hurt to read. At his penthouse overlooking the Thames, Khalid Al-Rashad hadn't slept either. The note, the translation, her voice. It all looped in his mind like a melody that refused to fade. He had told himself he'd mastered emotion long ago, that the world respected him because he never flinched. But Layla's words had found the fault line in his armor. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, the press is asking again about the trust transfer. They claim there's a whistleblower. Khalid's expression darkened. A whistleblower? An anonymous source. They say someone at the Aurelian may know about the document. He froze. Layla. No, he murmured. She wouldn't. Still, doubt crept in, cold and poisonous. The next evening, Layla arrived at work only to find whispers waiting for her. Did you hear? A coworker said as they polished glassware. Some billionaire's fortune got leaked. They're saying a waitress might have seen something she shouldn't. Layla's heart dropped. That's ridiculous. Yeah, but your table. He's been back 3 nights asking for you. Her throat tightened. He's here now. No. But he left this. The hostess handed her a small folded napkin with elegant handwriting. If you wish to speak truth, come to where we both hide ours. K***. Layla's pulse jumped. What does that mean? She recognized the phrase instantly, a line from the same poem. The place where we both hide ours. It could only mean one thing, the Aurelian after closing. That night, as the restaurant emptied, she stayed behind under the pretense of inventory. The lights dimmed. The hum of the city faded. Then, the soft sound of footsteps. Khalid emerged from the shadows, no bodyguards, no entourage. Just a man in a dark coat, carrying the same tired silence as before. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Neither should you, he said. They stared at each other across the polished floor. 2 worlds colliding in the quiet glow of candlelight. You think I leaked your secret, she said finally. Khalid's eyes flickered. I didn't want to. But you do. He exhaled. Someone is talking. Journalists know details only you could have known. Layla's hurt flashed like fire. I haven't said a word. I'm not stupid. I never said you were. You implied it. Silence. Thick. Heavy. She turned away, blinking hard. You think everyone wants something from you. Money, power, access. Maybe you can't imagine someone not wanting anything at all. His voice softened. And what do you want, Layla? Her laugh was brittle. A full night's sleep. Khalid smiled faintly. Pain behind it. That makes two of us. The air between them pulsed with unspoken words. Accusation, longing, confusion. Finally she asked, "What was she like?" "The woman from the letter." Khalid's gaze dropped to the table, his fingers tracing invisible lines across the surface. "She was honest. Brutally so. She told me truth was love's only proof. And I failed that test." Layla swallowed. "Then maybe you've been looking for someone to prove you can pass it this time." Their eyes met, and something inside him fractured. He stepped closer, then stopped himself. "Don't tempt me with mercy I don't deserve. You're human, Khalid." "No," he said quietly. "I'm a man who built empires to bury guilt. And every word you speak unearths it again." She took a step toward him. "Then maybe that's the point." A moment of charged silence stretched between them. For an instant they both looked like they might break the distance. Reach out, cross the line neither dared to. But the spell broke when her manager's voice echoed from the kitchen doorway. "Layla." "Still here." She jumped back, heart pounding. "Coming." When she looked again, Khalid was gone. Only a folded note lay where he'd stood. She opened it. "I don't know what this is. But I can't stay away." Her pulse fluttered. Against her will, a small, trembling smile escaped her lips. That night, as rain streaked down her apartment window, Layla held the note and whispered to herself, "Neither can I." Both of them, miles apart, stared into the dark, resisting what had already begun to happen. They didn't know it yet, but the more they tried to deny the connection, the deeper it would pull them in. The rain had turned relentless the next morning. London gray, heavy, endless. Layla trudged through puddles toward the Aurelian, clutching her umbrella and the folded note in her coat pocket. The night's memory still replayed in her mind. The confrontation, his eyes, the silence between them that said too much. She didn't know what they were to each other. Strangers, confessions, something else. But she knew it wasn't over. When she reached the restaurant, a black car idled across the street. A man leaned against it, expression unreadable beneath the drizzle. "Layla Haddad?" Her stomach tightened. "Yes." He flashed a badge. "Private security. Mr. Al-Rashad requests your company. It's important." She froze. "Why?" "Someone tried to access your personnel file last night. He thinks you may be in danger." Her heart lurched. Danger from who? The man didn't answer, only opened the car door. Khalid was waiting in a private suite overlooking the Thames, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear. "She's here," his guard said. He turned immediately. "Layla." His voice softened, relief cutting through the tension. "I didn't mean to frighten you. But someone's been digging into both our lives." Layla set her bag down, trying to steady her breath. "You think this has to do with the letters?" "Yes." He motioned for her to sit. "The leak from my company wasn't random. It's connected to the will, the missing inheritance." Layla blinked. "The $180 million?" He nodded grimly. "Someone wants to make sure I never expose what really happened. And now that you've seen those letters, you're part of it." "So what? This is protection." "Temporary," he said. "Until I know who's behind it." Layla exhaled. "You brought me here to protect me? Or to keep me quiet?" His eyes flickered. "Both." The silence between them throbbed with tension. Not fear, but something more complex. Layla sank into the leather armchair. "You can't just lock me away, Khalid. I have work, a life." "Do you trust me?" he interrupted softly. She hesitated. "I don't know yet." His jaw tightened, but there was no anger. Just sadness. "Fair." He turned away, gazing out the window as the rain blurred the skyline. "You know, I spent 10 years trying to bury that poem. I wrote it after I signed the document that destroyed everything. My brother's fiancé's family lost everything. Her name was Samira." Layla's voice gentled. "And you've been trying to make it right ever since." "Trying," he echoed. "But redemption doesn't answer when you call. It waits." For a long moment neither spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping the glass. Finally, Layla said quietly, "Maybe you're not supposed to fix the past. Maybe you're supposed to learn how to stop punishing yourself for it." He turned then, eyes searching hers. "You speak as if you've done the same." Her lips parted. "I've made mistakes too. My mother, she got sick. I dropped out of university to care for her. I told myself it was temporary, but..." She swallowed hard. "I never went back." Khalid's expression softened. "You sacrificed your dream for love. And you buried yours for guilt." Their eyes met. Two broken truths staring back at each other. Hours passed in that quiet room, the city fading to background noise. Layla helped him sift through documents tied to the old inheritance. The will, the signatures, the encrypted messages that hinted at betrayal. Each page peeled back another layer of his shame, and another piece of her guarded heart. At one point, she laughed softly at a mistranslated line in Arabic legalese. "Did you know this says, 'May his camels be fruitful,' instead of 'May his heirs prosper'?" Khalid chuckled for the first time in years. "That explains the confusion." Her laughter echoed like sunlight through fog. "You really don't smile enough, you know. I've forgotten how." "Then we'll fix that first." Her words hung in the air. Light, teasing but charged. He looked at her then, really looked, and something inside him shifted. "You talk like someone who's not afraid to fix broken things." "Only if they're worth it," she said softly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was electric. When dusk fell, Khalid poured her tea from a silver pot, the gesture strangely domestic. "You should rest here tonight," he said quietly, "until I'm sure you're safe." Layla hesitated. "Safe from what?" "People who think you know more than you do." "And do I?" she asked. Khalid paused, setting the teapot down. "You know enough to destroy me." "But I won't," she said. "You already did that to yourself." His breath caught. Half laugh, half surrender. "You don't hold back, do you? Not when someone hides behind guilt." Khalid's gaze softened. "And you? What do you hide behind?" She looked down at her hands. "Service. Politeness. It's easier to be invisible than to risk being seen and dismissed." He reached across the table, fingers brushing hers, a fleeting touch, careful, reverent. "You're anything but invisible, Layla." Her pulse fluttered wildly. For a heartbeat, time stilled. The world outside could have disappeared and neither would have noticed. Then she drew her hand back, eyes glistening. "You should get some sleep, Khalid." He smiled faintly. "You too." As she turned to leave, he said softly, "Thank you for staying." She paused at the door. "You're welcome for letting me." And for the first time, both of them felt something neither had known in years. Peace, fragile and undeserved, but real. Have you ever been forced to face someone you were trying to forget, only to realize it was exactly what you needed? Comment below, when hearts collide, do you fight it or finally surrender? Morning arrived softly, gray light spilling through the curtains of Khalid's suite. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the Thames gleaming like liquid steel. Layla awoke on the sofa, the soft ticking of an antique clock filling the silence. For a moment she forgot where she was, until she saw him standing by the window, coffee in hand, lost in thought. He looked different. Not the billionaire from the headlines, but a man stripped of armor, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly undone. Human. "Did you sleep?" she asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. He turned, smiled faintly. "Tried. Failed. You." "Same." She rubbed her eyes, then added, "I dreamed in 2 languages. It was exhausting." That drew a soft laugh from him. "You're the only person I've met who could make exhaustion sound poetic." Layla smiled weakly, then noticed a small wooden box open on the table beside him. Inside were old photographs, folded papers, and a faded engagement ring. Her chest tightened. "Is that hers?" Khalid nodded. "Samira. My brother's fiancée." He took the ring, turning it over in his hand. "She wanted to start a literacy foundation in Riyadh." I helped handle the paperwork. Or so I thought. He paused, eyes distant. The contract I signed wasn't a grant. It was a transfer. An inheritance clause my business partner slipped in. When my brother died, the funds went to his company instead of her family. $180 million. Gone overnight. Layla's breath caught. And you didn't know? Not until after the funeral. I tried to fix it, but every attempt was buried by lawyers and greed. His voice cracked. By the time I found out, Samira's father had taken his own life. The scandal was silenced. And I was told to stay silent too. Layla's throat ached. So the letters were my confession. I kept writing them to her as if she could still hear me. I wanted to say I was sorry, but the world doesn't let men like me apologize. It lets us atone. She stared at him, eyes shining. You've been living in a prison made of guilt. He met her gaze. And you? What do you carry, Layla? The question hit deeper than she expected. She turned away, staring at the rain-streaked window. I told you about my mother. What I didn't tell you is, I had a scholarship to the Sorbonne. Linguistics. It was everything I'd ever wanted. When she got sick, I promised I'd go back after her surgery. But she didn't make it. Khalid's voice softened. And you never went back. Layla shook her head. No. I couldn't face the idea of building a future she wouldn't see. So I came here. Waitressing was supposed to be temporary. Then days became years. Khalid studied her quietly. You gave up your dream for love. She smiled sadly. You gave up yours for guilt. Seems we're both fluent in sacrifice. For a while they sat in silence. Two people from different worlds, their pain unexpectedly fluent in the same language. Then Layla said softly, May I see the rest? Khalid frowned. The rest? The letters. The ones you never showed anyone. He hesitated, then nodded. They're in the box. She opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of folded pages, each beginning with the same Arabic greeting. To the one I failed. Her hands trembled as she read the first one aloud. If love is truth, then silence is the cruelest lie. And I have been a liar too long. She looked up at him. You wrote this years ago. He nodded. The day the press called me the coldest man in the Gulf. I deserved it. She smiled faintly. You don't believe that anymore. His voice was rough. Because of you. She didn't answer, just folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside. Because you're finally saying it out loud. Something shifted in his expression, a hint of release, like a man who had carried a weight too long. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Layla, can I ask you something? She met his gaze. Anything. Why didn't you sell my story? You could have made more than you earn in 10 years. Layla smiled softly. Because some stories don't belong to the world. They belong to the people brave enough to tell them. He looked at her for a long time, then reached for the final letter in the box, one sealed, unopened. I never had the courage to read this one. It's the last thing I wrote before I stopped. Then let's read it together. He handed it to her, and with trembling fingers she broke the seal. The handwriting was less precise this time, almost frantic. If one day someone sees through me, tell her I left the world to her eyes. Because truth deserves a witness. Layla's breath hitched. You wrote this before ever meeting me. Yes, he whispered. But somehow it feels like I wrote it for you. She looked up, tears threatening. Maybe you did. They sat there, the air between them thick with everything neither dared to name. Grief, hope, connection. Khalid finally whispered. Do you believe people get second chances? Layla met his gaze. Only if they stop running from the first. That night, when Layla finally left, the suite felt emptier than before. But lighter, too. Khalid stood by the window, watching her disappear into the London fog, whispering to the ghost of his past. She found me. Do you think guilt and love can coexist? Or must one be released for the other to grow? Comment below, what's harder, confessing your mistakes or forgiving yourself for them. It had been 3 days since Layla last saw Khalid. The restaurant buzzed with its usual hum of clinking glasses and murmured conversations, but her mind drifted every time someone in a suit walked in. Part of her expected him to appear again. Dark eyes, quiet presence, a note tucked into his hand. Another part feared he wouldn't. Then, on the 4th evening, he did. No entourage. No tension this time. Just Khalid, dressed simply, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a tired but genuine smile softening his face. "Table 12?" he asked the hostess. When Layla appeared, her breath caught. "You came back." "I promised I would," he said. She smiled, fighting the warmth in her chest. "Coffee?" "Only if you have one with me." They sat across from each other after hours, the cafe emptied and quiet except for the low hum of the city beyond the glass. For once, there was no shadow of danger between them. Just two people learning how to exist in the same silence. Khalid stirred his coffee absently. You ever wonder how two lives can cross at the exact wrong or right moment? Layla tilted her head. "You mean fate." He smiled faintly. "I used to laugh at the word. But lately I'm not so sure." Layla leaned back, her tone playful. "Careful, you're starting to sound human. Don't ruin my reputation." Her laugh came easily this time, and it filled the quiet space between them with something lighter than words. Something like peace. They began to meet more often after that. Sometimes at the cafe. Sometimes at the park near the river. Sometimes over takeout cartons and bad Netflix subtitles that Layla couldn't help correcting out loud. "My dear, I cannot forget you," she read from the screen. That's not what he said. In Arabic, it's closer to, "Your memory refuses to leave me." Khalid chuckled. "That's more painful." "Exactly," she said, smiling. "Love usually is." He watched her as she laughed, something tender and unfamiliar stirring inside him. "You make me forget how to be guarded." Layla's gaze softened. "And you make me remember that not all walls are worth keeping." One evening, as the city lights shimmered on the Thames, they walked along the riverbank, wrapped in coats and conversation. "You ever think about leaving London?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But every city feels like an apology waiting to be said. London, at least, lets me stay quiet." Layla smiled. "You don't seem very quiet to me anymore." "That's your fault." They stopped by the railing. The wind tugged gently at her hair. He looked at her then, not the way he used to look at people, with calculation and control, but with wonder. "Do you know what you've done, Layla?" She blinked. "What have I done?" "You've turned my guilt into language again." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then, softly, Layla said, "Maybe it was always just waiting for the right translator." The words lingered in the air between them. Warm, fragile, utterly human. Later that night, back in his suite, Khalid showed her something new. An open document on his laptop. "I'm rebuilding the foundation," he said. "Samira's project. The literacy one. I'll fund it personally this time." Layla's eyes lit up. "That's incredible." He hesitated. "I was hoping you'd help me lead it." She froze. "Me? You understand what it means to give people a voice. You translate more than words, Layla. You translate people." Her throat tightened. "You really mean that?" He nodded. "Completely." She smiled, tears forming. "Then yes. 1,000 times yes." Khalid exhaled like a man who hadn't breathed freely in years. For a long while neither spoke. Then, almost shyly, he said, "I'd like to show you something." He reached into the wooden box and took out one of his old letters, the first one. "I rewrote it." He handed it to her. "To the one I failed, I finally met the one who made failure worth surviving. Her kindness is the proof that truth still loves me." Layla looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "You rewrote your past." He smiled gently. "No. You helped me rewrite its ending." She placed her hand over his, fingers intertwining. "Then let's make sure this one ends better." He didn't reply in words, just squeezed her hand, a silent promise of redemption, of something new. The following week, they met again at the same table where it had all begun. The golden glow of the Aurelian reflected in the glass, the hum of soft music around them. Layla raised her cup in a toast. To truth. Khalid clinked his cup against hers. And to the woman who taught me not to fear it. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, where grief and joy finally learn to coexist. Outside, the rain began again, but it no longer sounded like sorrow. It sounded like renewal. The morning after their toast to truth, London woke to chaos. The news broke before sunrise. Anonymous source leaks billionaire's secret philanthropy cover-up, alleged accomplice identified. A blurred photo accompanied the article. The woman in it, her dark hair, her tired smile, was unmistakable. Layla. She stood frozen behind the counter of the Aurelian, the newspaper trembling in her hands. Her name wasn't printed, but her face was enough. The headline twisted every truth she thought she'd shared. She barely noticed her manager's voice. Layla, is this you? She swallowed hard. It's complicated. But complication wasn't enough to stop the damage. Within hours, reporters swarmed the street outside. The restaurant's phone rang non-stop. And when she tried to call Khalid, nothing. Straight to voicemail. At that same hour, Khalid sat in his office, the article glowing on his phone screen. His expression was unreadable. Part disbelief, part devastation. His head of security spoke from the doorway. The journalist says the documents came from an employee at the Aurelian. Khalid's voice was low, dangerous. They were encrypted. Only one person saw them. Should we issue a denial? He didn't answer. He just stared at the photo again. The ache in his chest was unbearable. Layla. The one person he'd let in. The one who knew everything. And now the whole world knew too. That night, Layla found herself outside his penthouse, rain clinging to her coat, heart pounding. The guard at the entrance hesitated before letting her through. He said no visitors. She lifted her chin. Tell him he owes me a conversation. Minutes later, Khalid appeared at the door. His eyes were cold, so different from the man who'd once looked at her like she'd rewritten his world. Why? He asked. Her voice shook. You think I leaked that? I don't know what to think anymore. Khalid. Do you have any idea what you've done? His tone rose, sharp. That article reignited every scandal I've spent a decade trying to make right. The foundation might collapse before it even begins. Layla's heart cracked. I didn't tell anyone. I swear. Then how did they get the files? I don't know. Maybe your people. My people don't betray me, Layla. She flinched. But I do. The silence that followed was unbearable. Her voice broke. After everything we've shared, that's what you think of me? His jaw tightened. You're not the first person to see something good in me and turn it into a weapon. Tears welled in her eyes. And you're not the first man to think love is just another liability. He turned away, unable to look at her. Maybe I was a fool to believe it could be anything else. Something inside her snapped. No, you were a coward. You finally let someone see you. And the second it scared you, you ran back to your guilt like a safety net. Her words hit hard. He turned slowly, eyes burning. You think you know me, Layla? You don't. You saw what you wanted to see. And you saw nothing at all. She was trembling now, anger and heartbreak fighting for air. You asked me to trust you and I did. I trusted the man behind the mask. But I was wrong. You're still hiding, Khalid. Just in a bigger room. He stared at her, something breaking behind his calm facade. Get out. Her breath caught. What? Before I say something I can't take back. The finality in his voice made her chest ache. She waited, hoping he'd stop her, hoping he'd soften. But he didn't. So she left. The elevator ride down felt endless. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked like a stranger. Eyes red, heart shattered. When she reached the street, reporters' flashes went off like lightning. Layla, did you leak the story? Are you the woman behind Al-Rashad's secret fund? She pushed through the noise, ignoring the questions, the cameras, the chaos. All she could hear was his voice. Get out. Back in his penthouse, Khalid stood by the window, fists clenched, eyes hollow. But when the door closed behind her, the silence hit like a tidal wave. He pressed his palms against the glass, staring at her small figure disappearing into the rain. For the first time, he couldn't tell if he was protecting his reputation, or just destroying his last chance at peace. He whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" Later that night, Layla sat on a park bench near the river, the city lights reflecting off the water. The world was spinning out of control, and yet all she could think of was the sound of his voice when he said her name the first time. Layla. Now it echoed like a memory already fading. She whispered into the cold air, "I didn't betray you. I loved you." Her voice broke on the last word. And somewhere across the city, so did Khalid's heart. The week that followed was silent. For the first time in months, Khalid Al-Rashad's world was utterly, painfully empty. No messages. No calls. No warm laughter spilling into his quiet spaces. Only the hum of his empire. Mechanical, lifeless, perfect. He had told himself that silence was strength. But this silence was different. It wasn't peace. It was punishment. Every night, he found himself opening the old wooden box again, running his fingers over the letters, over her handwriting where she'd once translated his words, bridging two worlds. He had spent his life mastering control, over others, over chaos, over his own heart. But love, he realized, was the one language he'd refused to learn fluently. And it had cost him the only person who'd ever made him feel human again. He stared at his reflection in the window. The billionaire, the recluse, the man who could buy forgiveness but not earn it. At last, he whispered to the glass, "You were right, Layla. I'm a coward." Meanwhile, across the river, Layla sat in her small apartment surrounded by unopened letters from journalists and lawyers, each one offering money for her story. She had deleted every single email. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She silenced it, heart heavy. Her manager had suspended her until things died down. Bills piled up. The world was calling her a traitor. And still, the only thing that hurt was that he hadn't. No call. No message. No apology. She told herself she was done. That she didn't need closure. That walking away was her dignity. But late one night, as she stared out at the London skyline, she whispered, "Why does it still feel like losing something sacred?" She pulled the folded napkin from her drawer, the one that read, "If you wish to speak truth, come to where we both hide ours." Her fingers brushed the ink, remembering the night everything changed. The place where they'd first seen each other not as waitress and billionaire, but as two broken people trying to heal. Maybe that's where it had to end, too. The next evening, Khalid's driver pulled up outside his penthouse. "Sir," the man said softly, "there's been a new statement." The journalist admitted the source wasn't her. Someone inside the firm leaked it. Khalid froze. "You're certain?" "Yes, sir. Miss Haddad's name is being cleared." For a moment, he couldn't move. The words sank in like stones breaking the surface of water. She hadn't betrayed him. All this time, he had doubted the one person who'd stood by him when everyone else fled. And now she was gone. He rose abruptly. "Get the car." "Sir, where?" "To the Aurelian." Layla stood outside the restaurant long after closing, the soft light spilling through the windows. The familiar smell of roasted coffee and rain wrapped around her like memory. She didn't know why she'd come, maybe to say goodbye to the part of her that had believed in him. Inside, the staff cleaned quietly. She slipped into table 12, their table, tracing her fingers along the surface where it had all begun. She whispered, "You said truth was love's only proof. I told you love needed trust. Maybe we were both right, and both wrong." Her eyes glistened. "Layla." The voice came from behind her. Low, hoarse, familiar. She turned. Khalid stood at the doorway, drenched from the rain, breath unsteady. His eyes were filled with something she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that begs to be forgiven. For a moment, neither moved. Then she said quietly, "What are you doing here?" He took a step closer. "Telling the truth." Her voice trembled. "You already did that. You just didn't believe mine." Khalid swallowed hard. "You were innocent." "I know now. The leak came from my own firm." Layla's breath caught. "So you finally trust me?" "I always wanted to. I just didn't know how." Her eyes burned. "You destroyed everything we were building because you were afraid of being wrong." "I know." His voice cracked. "And if I could take it back." "You can't." Silence. The sound of rain filled the space between them. Khalid looked down, shame etched across his face. "I spent years thinking redemption was about money, or legacy, or public forgiveness. But you showed me it's about courage. And I didn't have enough of it when it mattered." Layla blinked back tears. "You hurt me, Khalid." "I know," he whispered. "And I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking anyway." Her heart twisted. She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to walk away. But standing there, seeing him stripped of all the power and pride that once defined him, she realized this was what healing looked like. Messy, painful, but real. Slowly she said, "If I forgive you, it's not because I forget. It's because I believe people can learn." Khalid stepped closer, his voice barely above a breath. "Then let me spend the rest of my life learning." For a moment neither spoke. The air between them pulsed with something fragile but alive. Hope reborn. Layla's voice was soft. "You have a lot to prove. I'll start now." He reached out his hand. She hesitated, then placed hers in his. For the first time, she didn't feel small next to him. She felt seen. As they stood there, the city hummed outside, rain streaking against the glass. The world was still messy. Pain still lingered. But something inside both of them had shifted. They had chosen truth over pride, love over fear. And that choice, fragile as it was, changed everything. Would you have forgiven Khalid? Or walked away forever? Comment below. When someone breaks your trust, do you believe love can rebuild it? Or is forgiveness just another risk? A month had passed since that night at the Aurelian. The world, once ruthless with headlines and scandal, had shifted its gaze elsewhere. The storm that had threatened to destroy them both had settled into silence. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that gives room for new beginnings. The Samira Foundation for Literacy had launched quietly, its website a simple page with a mission statement written by Khalid and translated by Layla. Truth deserves a voice, even when it trembles. Donations flooded in. Letters arrived from students across the Middle East, thanking the foundation for scholarships in Samira's name. For the first time in a decade, Khalid felt peace, not the cold kind, but the living kind. Yet one thing remained unfinished. He hadn't seen Layla since that night. They had spoken briefly. Phone calls about logistics, about press, about statements. But not about them. He wanted to give her space, but every silence stretched like a punishment he no longer wanted to serve. Finally, one rainy evening, because it always seemed to rain when it mattered, he returned to the Aurelian. The same table. The same chair. The same city outside the window, reflected in the glass like a memory trying to come home. He waited. And as if the universe had kept its promise, Layla appeared. She didn't wear her uniform this time. Just a soft cream sweater, a notebook in her hand, and the quiet kind of strength that only comes from surviving heartbreak and choosing grace anyway. Their eyes met and the world went still. "Table 12?" she asked, a small smile touching her lips. He exhaled. "Always." For a moment, they simply sat there, the weight of all that had passed suspended in the warm light between them. Khalid spoke first. "You look well." "I'm learning to be," she said softly. "The foundation's beautiful. You did it." "We did it," he almost said but stopped himself. He reached into his jacket and slid a small envelope across the table. "For you." Layla hesitated before opening it. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, familiar ink, familiar rhythm. To the one who taught me the language of forgiveness. You showed me that truth isn't about being right. It's about being real. You turned my silence into words, my guilt into purpose, and my heart into something brave enough to begin again. If love is truth, then this is mine. You were never my mistake. You were my translation. Layla's hand covered her mouth, eyes wet. When she finally looked up, her voice was a whisper. You rewrote the ending again. He smiled faintly. This time, I wanted you to read it first. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. You're impossible. And you, he said gently, are unforgettable. They sat in quiet for a long while, the city moving softly beyond the window. Layla finally spoke. I kept the napkin, you know. The one you wrote on. He chuckled. Of course you did. I look at it sometimes when I'm scared to trust people again. And what does it tell you? She smiled through her tears. That sometimes the truth finds its way back. Khalid leaned forward, his voice lower now, tender. Then let me ask the question I was too afraid to ask before. Layla's heart raced. What question? He took her hand gently across the table. Will you stay? Not because you pity me. Not because of the foundation. But because you want to see where truth can take us now. Her eyes shimmered with the weight of every word unsaid. Khalid. She began, her voice trembling. I don't know what happens next. I just know that I've spent too long translating other people's words when what I really needed was to write my own. Then let's write them together. Silence. Then she nodded. Okay. And that one word carried forgiveness, love, and the courage to begin again. Later that night, as they walked out of the Aurelian, rain whispered on the glass once more. Khalid opened his umbrella and held it out for her. We keep meeting in storms, he said. Layla smiled, stepping under it beside him. Maybe that's just how we find the light. They walked in step along the Thames, the city reflected in silver puddles, laughter breaking the long quiet. For the first time, their silence wasn't heavy. It was full. Weeks later, the world saw a photo, a candid shot of them at the Foundation's opening ceremony. Layla stood at the podium, reading aloud from one of Khalid's letters, the same one she had translated months ago. My silence was love misspoken, not absence. When she looked up from the page, her gaze found him in the crowd, and he smiled back, not the guarded, perfect smile of a billionaire, but the open human one of a man finally at peace. The audience applauded. Cameras flashed. But to them, the noise faded into something simpler. The quiet joy of two people who had found what they never thought they would. Not perfection. Not absolution. Just love at last. That night, back at the river, Khalid asked her softly, Do you still believe in fate? Layla leaned into his shoulder. No, she said. I believe in timing. And in people who finally stop running from what's real. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Then here's to what's real. The wind carried the sound of the river, the lights glimmered across the water, and somewhere in the distance, a familiar phrase whispered through both their minds, the one that had started it all. If you wish to speak truth, come to where we both hide ours. And this time, neither of them needed to hide anymore. Do you believe some loves arrive too late, or exactly when they're meant to? Comment below, what would you have done in Layla's place? Walked away, or stayed to rewrite the ending? The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.